The gentle hum of the brand-new engine was a quiet promise, a secret I held close to my heart, a symphony of maternal love orchestrated in hushed tones and careful planning, ready to be unveiled in a crescendo of joy. Outside, the sky, a canvas of bruised purple and sullen gray, was beginning to weep, a soft, melancholic drizzle that mirrored the bittersweet ache of nostalgia I always felt when I thought of Daniel, my boy who had somehow sprinted into manhood while I was still meticulously cataloging his childhood milestones, pressing faded crayon drawings between the pages of memory. This car, a sleek, graphite gray sedan that still breathed the pristine scent of untouched leather and limitless possibility, wasn't just a vehicle meticulously chosen for its safety features and fuel efficiency. It was intended as a bridge across a silently widening estuary, an olive branch extended with a hopeful hand, a testament to a love that persisted with stubborn resilience despite the growing silences, the unsettling distance that had crept into our relationship like an insidious, chilling fog. I'd scrimped and saved with a quiet determination, pored over glossy brochures until the images blurred, negotiated with a surprisingly charming, fresh-faced young salesman named Kevin who reminded me, just a little, of Daniel in his more earnest days. All of it, every careful step, was orchestrated to culminate in that one perfect moment, the look on Daniel's face, that fleeting, unguarded, boyish delight I hadn't witnessed in years, not since he'd become so thoroughly engrossed in his own burgeoning world, a world that, with increasing painfulness, seemed to have less and less accommodating space for me. The journey to his city apartment, a sterile box in a fashionable but anonymous district, was a pilgrimage of maternal anticipation, each mile marker on the rain-slicked highway a countdown to a moment I'd rehearsed in my mind 1,000 times, polishing it like a precious jewel. His initial surprise, the slow dawn of understanding, his inevitable gratitude, perhaps even a hug that lingered, a genuine warmth that had become such a rare, almost forgotten currency between us. The rain, initially a hesitant mist, began to fall with more conviction now, blurring the already harsh city lights into impressionistic, melancholic streaks, but it couldn't dampen the hopeful, resilient glow that warmed me from within. This car, I fervently believed, was a tangible thing, a grand, undeniable gesture, something he couldn't dismiss as easily as he sometimes dismissed my calls with a curt, "Can I call you back, Mum?" or my carefully chosen, smaller gifts, the books he never read, the sweaters that remained in their boxes. It was practical, yes, he'd mentioned in passing, months ago, the escalating frustrations of needing a reliable vehicle for his freelance work, but it was also deeply, profoundly symbolic, a mother's primal desire to smooth the often rutted path for her child, to offer a tangible measure of comfort and security as he navigated the bewildering complexities of adult life. I remembered, with a clarity that was almost painful, the countless sacrifices, small and large, the late nights worked when my body ached for rest, the foregone luxuries I'd dismissed with a wave of my hand, all poured into the sacred vessel of his future, his happiness. It was never, not for a moment, a burden, it was always a privilege, a sacred duty, to nurture his dreams, to watch him fledge. But lately, a subtle, pervasive chill had entered our exchanges, a perfunctory, almost brittle politeness where easy, teasing affection once resided. I'd told myself, repeatedly, that it was just him growing up, establishing his hard-won independence, the natural, albeit excruciatingly painful, pulling away that all parents must endure. This car, this significant, beautiful offering, I desperately hoped, would serve as a potent reminder of the unbreakable, invisible thread that bound us, a tangible symbol of my unwavering support, my deep, abiding love that asked for so little in return. Perhaps just a moment of genuine connection, a shared smile that wordlessly acknowledged the profound depth of our shared history, our intrinsic bond. The windscreen wiper swished a rhythmic, almost hypnotic accompaniment to my thoughts, each sweep a small, temporary erasure of the blurring rain, as if valiantly clearing the way for the perfect, unblemished moment of revelation. I clutched the spare key in my pocket, its cool, precisely cut metal a reassuring weight against my palm. A key to his surprise, a key to, perhaps, a small, hesitant reopening of his increasingly guarded heart. I was early, of course, a deeply ingrained habit from years of orchestrating school runs and doctor's appointments with military precision. I wanted everything, absolutely everything, to be perfect, a flawless tableau of maternal devotion. The graphite sedan, gleaming with an almost defiant luminescence even under the increasingly insistent downpour, sat parked directly across the street from Daniel's characterless apartment building, a silent, expensive testament to my hopeful extravagance. I'd chosen the spot with care, maneuvering into it with a precision born of nervous anticipation, ensuring he'd be certain to see it from his third-floor window, imagining his curious gaze drawn to its unfamiliar silhouette, the slow, wonderful dawning of realization. The rain was no longer a gentle, melancholic weep but a steady, percussive drumming on the car's roof, a relentless soundtrack to my slowly growing unease, each drop a tiny pinprick against the fragile balloon of my hope. I sent him a simple, breezy text message, carefully worded to sound casual, unexpectant. Here, darling. Just across the road when you're ready. No rush at all. Exo the little blue ticks, signifying delivery, and then, crucially, read, appeared almost instantly, a small, cold, digital comfort in the gray, waterlogged afternoon. Then, nothing. An absolute, deafening silence from his end. The minutes began to stretch, each one taut and uncomfortably elastic, like an overwound clock spring. The windows, sealed against the deluge, began to fog from the warmth of my anxious breath, and I wiped a clear patch with the sleeve of my coat, my gaze fixed with an almost painful intensity on his building, searching for any sign of movement, any flicker of a curtain, any indication that my message had registered beyond a cursory glance. Another text, 10, then 15, agonizing minutes later, my attempt at nonchalance fraying. It's raining quite hard now, sweetie. Getting a bit wild out here. Let me know when you think you might be coming down. Still no rush, though. Exo this time, the reply was swift, a single, brutal, unadorned word that landed with the force of a physical blow. Busy, no explanation, no softening apology, no give me a moment, mum, just busy. The word hung in the chilled, confined air of the brand new car, a tiny, sharp icicle piercing the warm, carefully constructed bubble of my anticipation. I understood busy. Lord, did I understand busy? I had been busy my entire adult life, juggling a demanding career, the myriad responsibilities of a home, the all-consuming, joyous, exhausting project of raising him. But there was a universe of difference between being genuinely occupied and being carelessly, cruelly dismissive. This felt, unequivocally, like the latter, a casual, almost contemptuous swatting away of my presence, my effort. I looked at the passenger seat beside me, where a small, hand-tied silver ribbon still adorned the gear stick, a silly, sentimental touch I couldn't resist adding that morning, picturing his smile. It suddenly seemed foolish, overly earnest, a pathetic symbol of a one-sided affection. The rain hammered down with renewed ferocity, relentless now, streaming down the windscreen in opaque sheets, distorting the world outside into a wavering, watery, hostile landscape. I was a still, silent figure encased in a luxurious metal shell, a mother with a grand, life-altering gesture held in frustrating abeyance, waiting. Waiting patiently, then impatiently, then with a growing sense of bewildered hurt, for a son who was simply, unequivocally, busy. The bitter irony wasn't lost on me, the woman who had rearranged her entire existence around his schedule, his needs, his whims, for over 2 decades, now relegated to an afterthought, a minor, irritating inconvenience in his apparently very important, very absorbing day. I thought of all the countless times, the countless hours, I'd waited for him, outside school gates in freezing weather, in drafty, antiseptic hospital waiting rooms after some minor childhood scrape or broken bone, at sparsely attended school recitals where my heart swelled with a pride so fierce it almost brought tears to my eyes, even if his performance was mediocre. This felt profoundly different. This wasn't the patient, loving waiting of a devoted parent, this was rapidly morphing into the demeaning, diminishing weight of someone deemed utterly unimportant, easily deferred. A deeper chill, one that had nothing whatsoever to do with the damp air seeping into the expensive car, began to settle in my bones, a cold premonition of a truth I had been desperately trying to avoid. The car, this beautiful, expensive, meticulously chosen symbol of my boundless affection, felt less like a joyous gift now and more like an elaborate, costly monument to my own persistent, perhaps willful, naivety. Perhaps I had misread everything, all the subtle cues, all the growing silences. Perhaps the distance wasn't just him asserting his independence, Perhaps it was a deliberate, calculated uncoupling, a slow, painful severance I had been too blind, too steeped in hopeful maternal delusion, to truly see. The rhythmic, insistent drumming on the roof became a mournful, percussive dirge, a lament for a connection that felt as if it were dissolving in the relentless, unforgiving rain. The minutes continued to bleed into each other, each one a small, cold drop in the rapidly accumulating, bitter pool of my disappointment. 30 minutes. 45. An hour. An entire hour of my life, spent sitting alone in a car, in a downpour, waiting for a son who couldn't be bothered. The rain was a relentless, opaque curtain, isolating me in my premature, now rapidly souring, generosity. My phone lay silent and dark on the passenger seat, a stark black rectangle mocking my earlier, almost giddy optimism. Busy the word echoed and re-echoed in the confines of my mind, each mental repetition stripping away another layer of my hopeful, carefully constructed facade, exposing the raw, tender flesh of maternal hurt beneath. What, I found myself wondering with a growing, unfamiliar bitterness, could possibly render him so utterly incapable of a simple, courteous "be down in a bit, Mum, caught up with something," or even a slightly more detailed, "so sorry, Mum, running unexpectedly late, can you give me 30? Was it a genuine, unavoidable work crisis? A sudden, debilitating personal emergency? Or was it, as a small, cold, insistent voice in the back of my mind began to whisper with increasing conviction, something far more mundane, far more ordinary, and therefore infinitely more painful, a simple, profound lack of consideration, a deep-seated, almost casual indifference to my time, my effort, my very presence? I pictured him inside his warm, dry apartment, perhaps comfortably engrossed in a mindless video game, idly scrolling through the curated perfection of social media, blissfully oblivious or, far worse, callously uncaring, that his mother, the woman who had given him life and dedicated hers to his well-being, was sitting alone in a torrential downpour, the grand, heartfelt surprise she'd so lovingly orchestrated slowly wilting like an unwatered, forgotten flower in a neglected vase. The distinctive new car smell, once so evocative of fresh starts and exciting possibilities, now seemed cloying, almost suffocating, a rich, expensive perfume at a sparsely attended funeral. My back ached from the prolonged, tense sitting, a dull, persistent throb that mirrored the undeniable, deepening ache in my heart. I thought again, not with resentment but with a dawning, painful clarity, of all the sacrifices, the small, daily acts of self-abnegation that constitute the bedrock of motherhood. The promotion I'd discreetly declined because its demanding travel schedule would have meant uprooting him during his crucial high school years. The modest inheritance from my own dear mother, every penny carefully invested and earmarked for his university education, not spent on the small, fleeting luxuries or the much-needed home repairs I sometimes craved. These weren't debts I ever expected him to repay, not in any tangible sense. But I had, perhaps foolishly, naively, assumed they had woven an intricate, resilient tapestry of mutual respect, of inherent, unspoken value. Now, that precious tapestry seemed irrevocably frayed, its vibrant threads unraveling, snapping one by one in the cold, indifferent, persistent rain. I tried to conjure the cherished image of his delighted face, the one I'd held onto like a talisman for weeks, but it kept being cruelly replaced by a more recent, far more frequent expression, a kind of bland, weary impatience, a subtle, almost imperceptible eye roll when I talked for too long about my day or asked too many concerned questions about his. When, precisely, had my stories become boring, my concerns irrelevant, my very presence a burden? When had I transitioned, in his eyes, from the warm, steady, reliable center of his world to a peripheral, slightly annoying, easily dismissed satellite? The rain outside showed no signs of abating, no hint of mercy. It lashed against the windows with a furious, relentless energy that felt almost personal, as if the heavens themselves were offended on my behalf, weeping at this casual display of filial ingratitude. Across the street, I saw an elderly woman, small and frail, struggle valiantly with an inside-out umbrella, her tiny frame battling the howling wind and driving rain, and a sharp pang of unexpected empathy shot through me. We were both, in our own distinct, solitary ways, weathering a significant, unwelcome storm. My storm, however, was almost entirely internal, a silent, raging tempest of disillusionment and dawning hurt, contained within the quiet, luxurious confines of this increasingly ironic, expensive, and profoundly unwanted gift. The keys, still clutched tightly in my damp hand, felt incredibly heavy now, not with the exciting promise of a joyful surprise, but with the crushing weight of a love that was, perhaps, too much, too unconditional, too readily available, for a son who had clearly, unequivocally outgrown the need for it, or at least, the need to acknowledge it with even the most basic modicum of common courtesy. The profound, echoing silence from his apartment was a shout, far louder and more resonant than the incessant drumming of the rain. It was a clear, unmistakable declaration of my perceived insignificance in the grand, absorbing scheme of his very busy life. Another 15 minutes, each one measured by the slow, agonizing sweep of the windscreen wipers, crawled by with leaden feet. Each tick of the dashboard clock was a small, sharp nail hammered into the rapidly closing lid of my hope's coffin. I finally, reluctantly, reached for my phone again, my fingers stiff with a combination of cold and a burgeoning, unfamiliar, and deeply unwelcome resentment. I dialed his number, the electronic ringing tone echoing with a hollow, tinny sound in the expensive, insulated car, each unanswered pulse a fresh, small wave of indignity washing over me. It went, predictably, to voicemail, his recorded voice, so bright and breezy and utterly disconnected from the reality of my situation, cheerfully asking me to leave a message, as if he hadn't just callously left me submerged in a veritable deluge for well over an hour, waiting like a forgotten parcel. I didn't leave a message. What, in God's name, was there to say? Darling, just a quick one. Your mother is slowly dissolving in a biblical rainstorm while you're terribly busy upstairs. Just wanted to let you know the brand new luxury car I bought you as a life-changing surprise is getting a remarkably thorough, if somewhat aggressive, wash. The sarcasm, though momentarily tempting, felt beneath me, a childish, impotent retort to a much deeper, more profound wound. Instead, I sent one last text message, the words carefully chosen, meticulously stripped of the cold anger that was now a tight, hard, painful knot in my stomach, a knot I could feel physically. Daniel, I've been waiting for over an hour now, and it's really coming down out here. I had something rather important I wanted to give you. If you genuinely can't spare a moment, I understand I'll need to leave soon. I stared at the screen, my eyes burning, watching the three little dots appear and disappear again, a frustrating digital dance of his indecision, or worse, his ongoing indifference. Finally, a reply materialized. Not a call, not a hasty, apologetic voice note, but another text message, colder, briefer, and more utterly dismissive than the first. Chill, Mum. Honestly. What's the big deal? I'm literally in the middle of something right now. Can't you just leave it with the doorman or something if it's that important? Leave it with the doorman. This car. This magnificent, expensive, thoughtfully chosen vehicle. This enormous, potentially life-altering gift. This tangible symbol of my enduring, unconditional love. Relegated to a mere package, an inconvenient errand, something to be routinely handled by a disinterested stranger because he, my son, was in the middle of something. The breathtaking callousness of it, the utter, staggering lack of comprehension or empathy, was like a sudden, sharp slap in the face. It wasn't just that he was making me wait, endlessly, disrespectfully, it was that he fundamentally did not grasp, or far more woundingly, did not care to grasp, the significance of my presence, the depth of the effort I had made, the very essence of the gesture. The rain seemed to intensify yet again, its drumming now a furious, almost violent accompaniment to the sudden, sharp, painful clarity that pierced through the fog of my disappointment and hurt. This wasn't just a thoughtless, momentary oversight, a simple lapse in judgment. This was a pattern, a well-established, deeply ingrained pattern of profound disregard that I had been diligently, foolishly, making excuses for, papering over with my own relentless, unquestioning affection, for far, far too long. The something important he was supposedly in the middle of, what could it possibly be that justified such blatant disrespect? A vital, career-defining work project on a Saturday afternoon? Highly unlikely, given his recent complaints about a lull in freelance assignments. More likely, I suspected with a sickening lurch in my stomach, It was something related to his new girlfriend, Tiffany, a young woman whose meticulously curated Instagram feed spoke volumes of expensive tastes, a relentless pursuit of superficial perfection, and a life lived almost entirely for public consumption, a life where, I couldn't help but imagine, a slightly damp, anxiously waiting, middle-aged mother didn't quite fit the desired aesthetic. The vague, nagging, persistent feeling that Daniel had been subtly, almost imperceptibly changing, distancing himself, aligning his priorities and values more closely with hers, now crystallized into a painful, undeniable certainty. He wasn't just busy, he was actively choosing. And in that choice, he wasn't choosing me, or even the common, basic decency one might extend to a casual acquaintance, let alone one's own mother. He was choosing his own convenience, his own carefully curated, self-absorbed world, where my unannounced, albeit loving, arrival with a life-changing gift was perceived as an unwelcome intrusion, an irritating wrinkle in the smooth, unblemished fabric of his self-centered existence. The hurt was a tangible, physical thing now, a sharp, stabbing, almost unbearable pain in my chest. But beneath it, something else, something entirely new and unexpected, was stirring, something cold and hard and unfamiliar. A decision. A quiet, resolute, powerful decision, forming inexorably in the fiery crucible of his profound, unthinking disrespect. The absolute finality of his text message, the casually dismissive phrase, "Can't you just leave it with the doorman or something if it's that important," hung in the super-chilled air of the luxury car like a death knell for a relationship I had cherished and nurtured for his entire life. It wasn't the relentless, driving rain that chilled me to the bone anymore, it was the icy, heartless draft of his profound, almost casual indifference. I looked at the sleek, ergonomically designed dashboard of the new car, its state-of-the-art digital clock glowing with an impassive, almost mocking luminescence, coolly marking the passage of precious time, my time, which he clearly valued so very little. The beautifully stitched, supple leather seats, the polished chrome accents, the sheer, undeniable expense and overwhelming thoughtfulness of this grand, maternal gesture, all felt suddenly, crushingly, profoundly absurd in the stark, unforgiving face of his casual, almost bored dismissal. I had imagined this specific moment, this exact interaction, so differently, so many times, playing it over and over in my mind like a favorite, heartwarming film, his eyes wide with astonished disbelief, a slow, incredulous smile spreading across his handsome face, perhaps even a rare, heartfelt, bone-crushing hug that spoke volumes more than words ever could. Instead, I was met with the emotional equivalent of a door slammed hard and shut in my hopeful face, the echo of its closing reverberating through the deepest chambers of my maternal heart. My hand, which had been clutching the cool metal of the spare key so tightly that its edges had dug into my palm, slowly, almost involuntarily, relaxed. The key lay cool and suddenly inert on my open palm. It was no longer a magical key to his surprised delight, but a stark, painful symbol of my own profound folly, my stubborn, almost willful refusal to see what was plainly, painfully, in front of my own eyes. The slow, insidious erosion of our once easy closeness, the increasing, noticeable infrequency of his calls which were once a daily ritual, the perfunctory, almost rote nature of our increasingly brief conversations, I had diligently, hopefully attributed it all to the natural, inevitable course of a young man finding his independent way in a complex world. Now, with a stark, brutal, painful clarity that felt like scales falling from my eyes, I saw it for what it truly was, it was neglect. Plain, simple, unadorned neglect. It was a quiet, steady, almost systematic devaluing of me, of our relationship, of our shared history. And I, in my boundless, perhaps monumentally foolish, maternal love, had kept on giving, kept on trying, kept on hoping to bridge the ever-widening chasm with grand, increasingly desperate gestures that he clearly didn't appreciate, or perhaps, even fully register on his self-absorbed radar. The rain, as if sensing a shift in the emotional atmosphere within the car, continued its relentless, furious assault on the roof and windows, but inside the expensive, silent cocoon of the sedan, a strange, almost preternatural calm began to settle over me. It wasn't the weary peace of resignation, not the defeated slump of a lost battle, but the quiet, powerful hum of a momentous decision made, a significant, life-altering path irrevocably chosen. My son, the boy I had poured my entire life, my hopes, my dreams into, did not truly see me. He did not value my time, my considerable effort, or the profound depth of my affection enough to simply step out into the rain for a few moments, or even to offer a kind, apologetic word over the phone. He was, it appeared, perfectly content to let me wait, indefinitely, to diminish the significance of my gift with his casual indifference, to treat me, his mother, as a minor, easily dismissed inconvenience. And in that cold, hard, crystalline realization, something profound, something foundational, shifted deep within me. The pain, the raw, bleeding hurt, was still there, a dull, persistent ache beneath the surface of my composure, but it was overlaid now with a newfound, almost startling clarity, a steely, unshakable resolve. I would not beg for his attention, for his acknowledgement. I would not further devalue myself or my love by waiting indefinitely for the scattered crumbs of his consideration. The car, this magnificent, beautiful, now profoundly unwanted offering, became an unexpected mirror, reflecting not his glaring ingratitude, but my own quiet, forgotten strength, a deep reservoir of resilience I had forgotten I possessed. I had come to his city, to his doorstep, to deliver a gift of pure, unconditional love. He had, in his thoughtless, casual carelessness, given me a different, far more valuable, if infinitely more painful, gift, the gift of unclouded sight, the gift of understanding, with absolute, irrefutable certainty, exactly where I stood in his life. And with that stark, unwelcome understanding came a decision, as clear and cold and definitive as the sheets of rain still streaking relentlessly down the windscreen. I picked up the spare key from my open palm, its precisely cut edges feeling sharp and distinct against my skin. I looked towards his apartment building one last, lingering time, not with yearning or wistful longing, but with a kind of detached, almost clinical assessment. Then, with a deliberate, resolute movement, I turned my gaze forward, through the rain-lashed windscreen, towards the open, beckoning road ahead. My road. With a quiet, decisive click, a sound that seemed to resonate with an almost symbolic weight in the hushed interior of the car, I inserted the key into the ignition. The powerful engine, silent for what felt like an eternity, purred back to life with a low, confident thrum, a resonant vibration that traveled up through the steering wheel, through my hands, and seemed to settle deep within me. It was a sound of awakening, of reclaimed agency, of a significant shift in the very tectonic plates of my emotional landscape. The decision, once fully formed and embraced, felt irrevocably, profoundly right, like a heavy, burdensome anchor finally, mercifully, cut loose, allowing the ship of my spirit to drift free. I wasn't truly angry anymore, not in the hot, sputtering, reactive way I might have been years ago, in a different iteration of myself. This was different. This was a profound, sorrowful, almost weary understanding, a quiet, deliberate drawing of a crucial boundary, a line in the sand that had been steadily, insidiously eroded for far too long by his casual neglect and my own hopeful denial. I put the car into drive, the gearshift moving with a smooth, satisfying precision. The graphite gray sedan, his intended chariot of newfound freedom and effortless convenience, slipped away from the curb as smoothly and silently as a shed tear, merging seamlessly into the rain-swept city traffic. There was no dramatic, tire-squealing departure, no final, scathing text message filled with recrimination. My vengeance, if such a quiet, internal act of self-preservation could even be called that, would be as quiet and dignified as the deep, aching pain he had so carelessly, so unthinkingly inflicted. It would be in the resolute withholding, in the silent, sorrowful reclamation of a magnificent gift he had, through his own blatant indifference, proven himself utterly, demonstrably unworthy of. As I drove, the blurred, distorted city lights, smeared by the relentless rain across the windscreen, seemed to reflect the unavoidable blurring of the future I had so lovingly, so hopefully envisioned for him, for us. The grand surprise, the joyous, triumphant unveiling, all that was gone now, washed away, dissolved in the relentless, unforgiving deluge of his monumental indifference. What remained was the car itself, a beautiful, powerful, sophisticated machine, now entirely, unequivocally under my sole command. And me. A mother who had finally, painfully, irrevocably understood that love, even a mother's fierce, unconditional love, could not, must not, be a one-way street indefinitely without ultimately withering the very soul of the giver. I glanced briefly at the empty passenger seat beside me, at the faint indentation in the plush leather where my handbag had rested, the seat where I had so vividly, so hopefully, imagined him sitting, beaming with surprised delight. Now it was empty, a small, stark, poignant symbol of his conspicuous absence, his deliberate, wounding choice. The journey away from his apartment building was the precise, melancholic mirror image of my hopeful, excited arrival just a few short, yet infinitely long, hours before. Then, my heart had been light, almost buoyant, full of joyful anticipation and maternal pride. Now, it was undeniably heavy, but not with the crushing weight of despair. It was the solid, grounding weight of accepted truth, of a necessary, painful ending and an unknown, yet somehow strangely, unexpectedly liberating, beginning. I wondered, with a detached sort of curiosity, if he would even notice my departure immediately, or if his mysterious, all-consuming something important would continue to consume him for hours more, rendering him oblivious to my absence. Would he, perhaps later that evening, glance casually out of his window, expecting to see my car, a familiar beacon of my patient, maternal vigil? Would a fleeting flicker of concern, or more likely, I suspected with a pang of residual sadness, a flicker of annoyance at a subtly disrupted plan, cross his mind? It scarcely mattered anymore, I realized with a surprising sense of detachment. My focus, with a newfound clarity, was on the road ahead, on the steady, reassuring rhythm of the wipers clearing my vision, both literally and metaphorically. This car, originally intended to signify his burgeoning independence, his smooth passage into adulthood, was now, with a delicious, almost cruel irony, facilitating mine. I was driving away from a version of motherhood I no longer recognized, a version that seemed to demand endless, unacknowledged sacrifice with ever-diminishing returns of respect or affection. He had left me waiting, abandoned and unseen, in the cold, driving rain, a seemingly small act of carelessness that had precipitated profound, life-altering consequences. He didn't know, would never know, that I was coming to deliver him a brand new car. And now, he never would. Not from me, at any rate. The precious, painful secret of my intended gift would remain locked securely in my heart, a poignant, bittersweet reminder of a love that had been carelessly, thoughtlessly spurned, and a difficult, invaluable lesson learned in the hardest, wettest, most profoundly disillusioning way imaginable. The sprawling, indifferent city receded steadily in my rearview mirror, a hazy, rain-streaked blur of neon and concrete, and with its gradual disappearance, a significant chapter of my life felt as if it were drawing to a quiet, almost imperceptible, yet deeply dignified close. The sleek graphite sedan, a marvel of engineering and design, moved through the dark, wet night with an effortless, almost feline grace, a silent, powerful testament to the grand, heartfelt gesture that had been so casually, so cruelly, rejected. There was no discernible triumph in my heart, no sharp, vindictive glee at his unknowing loss, only a profound, pervasive sense of sorrow, an aching awareness of a rift that had been brutally, irrevocably laid bare. Yet, paradoxically, beneath the heavy blanket of sorrow, a new, unfamiliar feeling was beginning to cautiously unfurl, a surprising, almost illicit sense of liberation, as unexpected as it was profoundly welcome. I had always defined myself so significantly, so completely, through the all-encompassing lens of motherhood, through Daniel's myriad needs, his youthful triumphs, his adolescent struggles. His casual, almost unthinking rejection of this magnificent gift, and by painful extension, of me, of my effort, of my love, was an undeniably excruciating severance, but it was also, in a strange, almost perverse way, a release from a burden I hadn't fully realized I was carrying. I was no longer waiting, passively, hopefully, for his acknowledgement. I was moving. I was in control, the master of my own direction, my own destiny, at least for this journey, in this moment. The car, this beautiful, powerful, sophisticated machine, was mine now, not just legally, by virtue of the title and my name, but emotionally, viscerally. It was no longer a hopeful offering to him, a bridge to his affection, but a sleek, responsive vessel for my own unfolding, unexpected journey. As I drove, the steady, reassuring hum of the powerful engine seemed to soothe the raw, abraded edges of my hurt, like a gentle balm on a fresh wound. I began to think, with a newfound clarity, about what I would do, what came next. My first instinct, born of ingrained years of disciplined frugality and a deep-seated, almost cellular practicality, was to sell it immediately, to recoup the considerable sum of money I had so carefully, so diligently saved. That would be the sensible thing, the prudent course of action. But then, another thought, more daring, more audacious, more aligned with this nascent, thrilling sense of self-reclamation, began to take hesitant shape in my mind. Why not keep it? Why not allow myself, for once in my life, this one extravagant, undeniably beautiful, wonderfully indulgent thing? I had earned it, I realized with a sudden, fierce conviction, not just through the money I'd meticulously paid, but through years of quiet, unacknowledged sacrifice, of consistently, almost unconsciously, putting others, primarily him, first. Perhaps this car, intended with such love for Daniel's anticipated new beginnings, could instead be the catalyst for mine. The idea, once conceived, was a small, warm, persistent ember glowing brightly in the cold, desolate landscape of my profound disappointment. I could finally take that long-dreamed-of trip to the wild, rugged coast, the one I'd postponed year after year because there was always something Daniel needed, some unexpected school expense, some new activity, some pressing demand that took undeniable precedence. I could visit my beloved sister, Clara, in the picturesque wine country, something she'd been gently, lovingly urging me to do for ages, an invitation I'd always met with vague promises of soon, Clara, soon. The possibilities, once so narrowly, so intensely focused on my son's potential joy, his future comfort, now expanded, almost dizzyingly, to encompass my own long-deferred desires, my own unspoken dreams. I drove for a long, contemplative time that night, with no particular destination in mind, simply allowing the smooth, effortless motion of the car and the profound, enveloping solitude to work their quiet, healing magic. The relentless rain gradually softened, easing from a torrential, angry downpour to a gentle, cleansing drizzle, as if mirroring the slow, steady calming of my internal, emotional storm. The intense, sharp pain of his blatant rejection was slowly, mercifully subsiding, leaving behind a residue of undeniable sadness, yes, but also a surprising, almost startling clarity. I had done my best. I had loved him with a fierce, unwavering, almost primal devotion. If that was no longer enough for him, or no longer valued by him, then the ultimate loss, I began to understand, was his, as much as, if not more than, mine. I would not, I resolved with a quiet, steely determination, allow his thoughtlessness, his casual cruelty, to define my intrinsic worth or to dictate the trajectory of my future happiness. This singular decision, made in the lonely, rain-swept confines of that luxurious, silent car, felt like a significant, unalterable watershed moment in the landscape of my life. It was a quiet, internal act of profound defiance, a steadfast refusal to continue enabling a dynamic that was slowly, insidiously, but surely, eroding my spirit, diminishing my sense of self. My deep, abiding love for Daniel hadn't magically vanished, of course not, but its outward expression, its tangible manifestation, would, by sheer, painful necessity, have to change, to evolve. The era of grand, unreciprocated, often unacknowledged, gestures was definitively, irrevocably over. It was nearly midnight, the city lights a distant, hazy glow in my rearview mirror, when I finally pulled the graphite gray sedan into my own familiar driveway. It sat there, a silent, gleaming, almost alien stranger in the well-known space usually occupied by my much older, far more modest vehicle. The house was dark and quiet, a welcoming sanctuary after the emotional tumult of the day. I sat for a long moment in the driver's seat, the engine off, the only sound the soft, almost imperceptible ticking of the cooling metal and the distant, mournful sigh of the wind through the trees, the rain having finally, mercifully, exhausted itself. I felt a profound, bone-deep weariness, the accumulated emotional toll of the day settling heavily upon my shoulders, my spirit. But it was a clean, almost cathartic weariness, I realized, not the frantic, anxious, soul-draining exhaustion I'd often felt in the past when trying to anticipate and seamlessly meet Daniel's often unspoken, yet always demanding, needs. This was the distinct fatigue that comes after a difficult, painful truth has been bravely faced, a hard, necessary decision finally made. I wondered, with a strange sense of detachment, if Daniel had even registered my absence from his street yet. Had he eventually called my phone, perhaps initially irritated, then mildly concerned, that his expected dinner or the laundry service I often provided during my visits, for I frequently combined my trips to see him with small, maternal acts of domestic help, hadn't materialized as usual? Or had his all-consuming, something important completely eclipsed any fleeting thought of me, any concern for my whereabouts or well-being? A small, sad, almost imperceptible smile touched my lips. It was a question that, surprisingly, held significantly less power over me now than it would have just 12 hours earlier. His reaction, or more likely, his utter lack of reaction, was his own affair, his own burden to carry, or not, as he chose. My actions, from this precise point forward, would be dictated by my own needs, my own well-being, my own hard-won dignity. I took the spare key, the one I'd clutched with such fervent, almost desperate hopefulness earlier that tumultuous day, and placed it carefully in the small, ornate porcelain bowl on my antique hall table, a bowl usually reserved for pretty, collected stones from past holidays or stray, forgotten buttons. It looked strangely elegant there, I thought, a silver fish glinting out of water, beautiful but displaced. It was no longer a key to his anticipated surprise, but a poignant memento of a painful, invaluable lesson, a quiet, understated symbol of a definitively closed door. Later, much later, after a long, hot bath that eased some of the tension from my tired muscles, I made myself a cup of strong chamomile tea, the warm, comforting mug a welcome solace in my chilled hands. I sat in my favorite armchair, the old, worn one that molded perfectly to my shape, and allowed myself, finally, to feel the full, unmitigated weight of the day's events. There was grief, certainly, an undeniable, aching grief. The long-cherished dream of a close, warm, reciprocal relationship with my adult son, a dream I had nurtured for years, had taken a significant, perhaps fatal, blow. But there was also, surprisingly, a nascent, burgeoning sense of peace, the unique kind of tranquility that comes from aligning one's actions with one's deepest, most authentic truths. I had chosen self-respect, I realized, over the painful, demeaning, and ultimately futile pursuit of an affection that was, at best, grudgingly given, if it was given at all. I hadn't sought revenge in the traditional, destructive sense. There would be no angry, tearful confrontations, no bitter, accusatory recriminations volleyed back and forth like poisoned darts. My final word, my true retribution, would be my quiet, dignified withdrawal, the silent, resolute reclaiming of my energy, my resources, my very self. The magnificent car, parked just outside my window, gleaming softly under the porch light, was the most eloquent, powerful statement I could possibly make. Its conspicuous, unexplained absence from his life would, I hoped, eventually speak volumes to him, or perhaps, more tragically, to him it would speak nothing at all, which in itself would be a further, sad, irrefutable confirmation of the vast, silent distance that now lay between us. But for me, its powerful, tangible presence in my life was already beginning to symbolize something new, something hopeful, a profound, unwavering commitment to my own future well-being, a quiet, steadfast determination to cultivate joy, peace, and fulfillment entirely on my own terms. The path ahead was undeniably uncertain, shrouded in mist, but it felt cleaner, less encumbered, less burdened by the weight of unreciprocated expectation. The rain had finally, definitively stopped. And I, Evelyn, a mother who had given so much, for so long, had finally, irrevocably, decided to give something precious, something invaluable, back to myself. The next morning dawned bright and clear, the world outside washed clean and sparkling by the previous day's deluge, the sunlight glinting like scattered diamonds on the rain-slicked leaves of the old oak tree in my garden. The graphite-gray sedan in my driveway seemed to absorb and reflect the crisp morning light, its sleek, elegant lines a quiet, confident statement of presence, of permanence. I spent the morning in a state of surprisingly reflective calm, the emotional turmoil of the previous day having settled into a resolute, almost serene stillness. Daniel did not call. Not in the early morning, not by lunchtime, not even as the afternoon shadows began to lengthen across my lawn. The silence from his end was profound, almost absolute, and in its own stark, unadorned way, deeply, painfully informative. It underscored, with brutal clarity, the yawning chasm that had opened between us, a chasm I had been so diligently, and perhaps so foolishly, trying to bridge with increasingly desperate, one-sided efforts. The utter lack of immediate concern for my welfare, the glaring absence of even a cursory, polite text message inquiring, "Are you okay, Mum? So sorry about yesterday's miscommunication," was a quiet, yet damning, affirmation of the rightness of my decision. He was, it seemed, perfectly content, perfectly absorbed in his own world, blissfully, perhaps willfully, oblivious to the significant ripples his casual carelessness had caused in mine. Around mid-afternoon, just as I was pouring myself a second cup of tea, my phone finally chimed with the familiar notification of an incoming message. My heart gave a small, involuntary lurch, a conditioned response I couldn't quite suppress. It was a text message from him. Not an apology, not a belated inquiry into my well-being or my whereabouts the previous day, but a blandly practical, almost prosaic question. "Hey, did you happen to drop off that book I lent you a while back? The one on urban planning? Can't seem to find it anywhere." I stared at the message on the small screen, a slow, weary wave of utter resignation washing over me. This was it. This was the sum total of his consideration, his filial concern. A lost book. After I had waited for him, his mother, for well over an hour in a torrential downpour, after I had driven away with an undelivered, potentially life-altering gift of immense value, his primary, pressing concern was a misplaced paperback novel. The sheer, unadulterated, almost breathtaking self-absorption of it was nearly comical, if it weren't so deeply, profoundly wounding. I typed a reply, my fingers moving slowly, deliberately, over the small keypad, each letter a conscious choice. No, Daniel. I didn't minimalist. Waited with unspoken meaning. I offered no further explanation, no elaboration, no excuses. Let him wonder. Let him, for once in his seemingly carefree existence, experience the small, unsettling discomfort of an unanswered question, an incomplete interaction, a void where he expected easy compliance. The subtle, deeply poetic justice of it was not lost on me. He had left my grand, loving gesture hanging, unresolved, unacknowledged. I would now leave his trivial, self-serving inquiry in the same empty, echoing void. He replied almost immediately, the speed of his response indicative of his usual impatience when his needs weren't instantly met. "Well, where is it then? Did you forget to bring it with you?" I took a slow, deliberate sip of my still warm tea, savoring its gentle flavor. I considered, for a fleeting moment, not replying at all, leaving him entirely in the dark. But then, I chose another path, one that maintained my newfound dignity while offering absolutely no comfort or resolution to his casual, ingrained entitlement. "I'm not entirely sure where it might be, Daniel," I typed carefully. "I confess I was rather preoccupied with other matters yesterday." The words, though outwardly mild, almost bland, carried the significant weight of unspoken truths, of unarticulated pain. Preoccupied by waiting endlessly in the cold rain. Preoccupied by a rising tide of disappointment. Preoccupied, most significantly, by the dawning, painful, irrefutable realization of his profound, almost shocking, disregard. Whether he would possess the insight, or even the inclination, to decipher the potent subtext, was entirely beyond my control, and, I realized with a small jolt of surprise, increasingly beyond my concern. My part, my only responsibility now, was to state my truth, however quietly, however indirectly. The magnificent car parked outside, a silent sentinel, seemed to hum its quiet agreement in the afternoon sun. It was a beautiful day, full of promise, and I had plans. Plans that most certainly did not involve an exhaustive search for his lost book, or waiting, with bated breath, for his belated, and likely still inadequate, attention. I had an appointment, a rather exciting one, with a highly recommended travel agent for later that afternoon. The coast, wild and free, was calling to me. And for the first time in a very, very long time, I was listening intently, joyfully, to my own deep-seated desires without the customary, almost reflexive, filter of maternal obligation or his perceived needs. His small, entirely self-centered query about a misplaced book, juxtaposed so starkly against the immense magnitude of what he had unknowingly, carelessly lost, was the final, quiet, definitive underscoring of my momentous decision. He didn't know, and would likely never know, that I was coming to deliver him a brand new, life-enhancing car. And now, his world would continue, oblivious and essentially unchanged by that crucial, unknown fact, while mine was quietly, yet irrevocably and wonderfully, shifting towards a new, brighter, self-determined horizon, one where my considerable generosity, my time, and my deep affection would be more discerningly, more wisely, reserved for those who genuinely valued them, starting, most importantly, with myself. The decision to keep the car, to fully embrace it not as a symbol of his rejection but as a powerful emblem of my own reclaimed journey and burgeoning independence, solidified with each passing hour of Daniel's continued, almost stunning, obliviousness. It was no longer a hesitant question of whether to sell it or to keep it, a debate between practicality and a whisper of desire. It was a quiet, resolute affirmation of my own intrinsic worth, a tangible manifestation of the new, uncharted path I was tentatively, yet with a growing sense of excitement and resolve, stepping onto. My sister, Clara, always my staunchest ally and most sensible confidant, was the first person I shared my news with, though not about the full, miserable, rain-soaked extent of Daniel's callousness. I spared her the most painful, demeaning details of my lonely vigil, knowing it would only distress her. I simply told her about the car itself, framing it as a spontaneous, if extravagant, decision for myself. Her reaction was one of pure, unadulterated, uncomplicated delight. "Evelyn. A brand new car? Oh, that's absolutely wonderful. What color is it? You completely, utterly deserve it, and more." Her uncomplicated, genuine joy was a soothing balm to my still bruised, tender spirit, a welcome contrast to the gnawing ache Daniel's indifference had left. When I vaguely, briefly mentioned that the vehicle had initially been intended for someone else, but that plans had, regrettably, changed, she didn't pry or press for uncomfortable details, merely said with her characteristic warmth and wisdom, "Well, darling, their profound loss is most certainly your glorious gain, then. Now, the only important question is, when are you driving that beautiful new machine down to see me?" Her words, so full of genuine affection and easy consideration, so starkly different from Daniel's self-absorbed, dismissive text messages, were a potent, reassuring reminder that genuine warmth, sincere affection, and thoughtful consideration still existed in the world, even if they were sometimes obscured by the actions of those closest to us. The deep, pervading irony of Daniel missing out on such a significant, life-altering gift due entirely to his own glaring lack of basic courtesy and consideration was a quiet, poignant, almost tragicomic undercurrent to my days. It wasn't, I found, a source of malicious satisfaction or vindictive glee, but rather a somber, almost melancholic acknowledgement of the inevitable, often unseen, consequences of his actions, consequences he remained, and would likely always remain, blissfully, perhaps even willfully, unaware of. He would continue, I presumed, to struggle with his old, increasingly unreliable vehicle, perhaps complaining about its faults, its inconveniences, never knowing, not even suspecting, how incredibly close he had come to such a substantial, life-improving upgrade, an upgrade offered freely, joyfully, from a mother's boundless, unconditional love. That hidden, potent knowledge was my silent, final, definitive word on the entire sorry matter. It was a secret I would carry, not as a heavy, resentful burden, but as a quiet, almost sacred testament to the crucial, painful turning point his own carelessness had unwittingly, and for me, ultimately beneficially, precipitated. I often imagined him, weeks or perhaps months from now, perhaps seeing a similar graphite gray sedan on the street and remarking idly on its sleek design or its smooth performance, never for a single moment connecting it to that dreary, rain-soaked Saturday, never understanding the sheer, breathtaking magnitude of the opportunity he had so casually, so unthinkingly, so disastrously discarded. My revenge, if such a quiet, internal recalibration of self could even be termed revenge, was not to be found in his potential suffering or his eventual regret, but in my own quiet, steady, undeniable flourishing. The travel agent, a cheerful, energetic woman with kind eyes and an infectious enthusiasm, listened patiently and attentively as I outlined my rather vague, yet deeply felt, desire to see the ocean, somewhere rugged and beautiful and profoundly peaceful. Together, we pored over glossy brochures filled with evocative images of dramatic, windswept coastlines, charming, historic seaside towns, and tranquil, secluded coves. The very act of planning a significant trip entirely for myself, by myself, was incredibly, unexpectedly liberating. For so many years, virtually all family holidays and excursions had revolved, almost exclusively, around Daniel's school breaks, his ever-changing interests, his absolute comfort and convenience. Now, the canvas was gloriously, thrillingly blank, waiting patiently for my own colors, my own unique design. I booked a small, charming, slate-roofed cottage on a remote, unspoiled stretch of coastline for a full week, a cozy haven with a real fireplace and a breathtaking, panoramic view of the restless, majestic sea. The graphite sedan, my silent, powerful companion, would carry me there, its smooth, effortless ride a comforting metaphor for the new, uncomplicated ease I was determined to cultivate and cherish in my life. The hidden fortune he had unknowingly forfeited wasn't just the considerable monetary value of the car, it was the boundless, immeasurable love and unwavering support it represented, a deep, inexhaustible wellspring he had, through his own careless, dismissive actions, effectively chosen to turn away from. My very identity, I realized, was subtly, yet profoundly, shifting. I was still Evelyn, mother of Daniel, that was an immutable fact, a part of my core being. But I was also, with growing confidence and a delightful sense of anticipation, becoming Evelyn, adventurous solo traveler, Evelyn, discerning woman of independent means and refined tastes, Evelyn, a person whose time, affection, and considerable generosity were precious, valuable commodities, not to be carelessly squandered on those who did not, or could not, fully value them. The quiet, deeply satisfying justice was to be found in this profound internal transformation, this significant, empowering emotional power reclaim. He had carelessly, cruelly left me waiting, a dismissed, devalued mother, in the cold, unforgiving rain. I had driven away, a woman on the very cusp of her own quiet, yet deeply significant, personal renaissance, powered, with a beautiful, almost poetic irony, by the very gift he had unknowingly, and so foolishly, refused.